Hi guys, welcome to the video of HOWS and WHYS of Yakobe, a video I've been wanting to do for over a year now, because when it comes to my band Yakobe and our first album Pursuits in Life, there are a couple of questions I get asked a lot, and instead of answering all of these people individually, I decided to shoot this video to give a very comprehensive answer to all of these questions and to create a sort of a reference point for them in case they're interested. So there are a couple of questions, like for example, how did I get such a big lineup on the first album, because some musicians are like genuinely famous people. What does the name stand for? But we're gonna start with the first question that I got asked most often. Why no guitars on the album? So with this I kind of assume you are already familiar with the album, so just very briefly, what makes it really unique is that it's a relatively heavy prog rock, almost going into that prog metal territory kind of music, but there are no guitars. Instead, it's all recorded with the instruments of drums, bass, saxophone, and keyboards. And some people actually went as far as to ask me like, dude, do you hate guitars? Well, of course I don't. If I hated guitars, I don't think there would be much music left for me to listen to. Also, I basically wrote the whole album on the guitar, so I can't hate the guitars. But in order to really answer this question properly, and in order for you to see the whole thought process behind it, we have to take a few detours down the memory lane, if that's how you say it. It's going to be probably a very long answer, but I can guarantee it's going to be a pretty entertaining listen, so let's start. I've been trying to put together a band for my own music for as long as I can remember, but the first time I started being like really serious about that was when I started posting ads or insertion, call it whatever you want. And I remember my very first ad, I was like, I'm looking for people who would like to invest all of their time, energy, money into the band, and serious interest only. I was very much trying to show that I was being very serious about it. And the first ad was, I think, in the end of 2008. I was 18, and at that point, that was the first year I was at the university. And I remember that at that time I wanted a modern rock band. I even mentioned a few examples like 6 AM, Souls of We, and more modern stuff from Europe, like Secret Society album. And I remember there was this one guy who already had a band. He contacted me and he was like, yeah, we play modern rock, we play like Airborne. I was like, Airborne? It's like AC/DC clone, that's old school rock and roll, that's not modern at all. Anyway, in the next couple of years I would have my first band, Bad Pools, and even at that point when I formed my first group, that we're talking about, I think, summer 2009, and I had this band for like a year. And we were a three-piece. There was a drummer, there was a guitar player, and originally I had an electric guitar, I had a combo, I had a little multi effect. I wanted to be the lead singer and a rhythm guitar player, but we couldn't really find any bass players, so I sort of became a bass player out of necessity rather than because I wanted to. But at that point, Kip Winger from Winger was my biggest musical hero, and I was like, okay, he was singing and playing bass, I want to do that too. So that's how I became the bass player. And in the next couple of years, I had an acoustic duo with Stevie Hart, who ended up being the keyboard player on my album Pursuits in Life. Then in 2011, I joined a group called Graceful, and basically we recorded my first official album. I was 21, that was like throughout the end of 2011, and it was kind of like hard rock music in the style of Van Halen and Extreme. The 19 years old guitar player who was in the band at that time, he was freaking awesome, like absolutely brilliant guitar player. And unfortunately the album was never released officially, which is kind of a shame, but that was my first proper studio experience. And in 2012 I started putting up ads again. I know that I would just never really look for people through insertion or through the ads. There were so many people who contacted me because in 2012, I recorded a 4-track demo, which included certain tracks from Pursuits in Life, like for example, We're Building Our Own Monument or Living in Fear, even Haters Gonna Hate, which is gonna end up on the next album. And I wanted to sort of showcase my music, what kind of music I wanted to do. I was also trying to find individual musicians because I felt that if I found a group would already have some sort of a vision or some sort of a idea of their musical direction, and I wanted to find individual people who I would sort of work on my vision with. So I thought it would be easier that way. And there are so many weird people that would contact you. You know, it's like, for example, there's this one, a really great example. There was this one guy who wrote me that I can play drums, but I don't have drums. I bought a guitar, but I can't play on a guitar. So I was like, what do you want to do in a band? Do you want to play keyboards? Like, there were all sorts of these weird amateurs that were contacting me, and those were not really people I wanted to have a band with. And in 2013, I was approached by a band called Hard Rock, like hard and rock together, and they were playing quite surprisingly hard rock. They were playing sort of like Guns N' Roses, Skid Row, and these songs. And at first I was reluctant to join them because as much as I love singing those songs, it just wasn't where I was as an artist at that point. I was writing more of this like art rock, prog rock kind of a music, which just wouldn't really go hand in hand with their music. But essentially I decided to join them, and it was a great decision because they were great people. A year later we sort of changed our name to Slip of the Lip, and we threw the bass player out of the group. I became the bass player of the band, and as a 4-piece we recorded an EP called For the First Time, which is actually my first official release. You can find it on Spotify. It's sort of a like hard rock / rock and roll / punk rock, and we've been together until 2017. I'm gonna get back to that, but in 2013 I was still trying to find people for my own group, and there was this one guy who was like a really great musician who contacted me. He was like 12 or 13 years older than me, so we're talking 2013, I was like 23. He might have been like 35, 36, I don't know. He was actually a very rich guy. He was a manager from Košice. He had a restaurant, but he was also a fantastic jazz pianist. He was like literally a great player. But even it was kind of weird the way he contacted me, because I think what he really liked was my attitude in the ad, because I was like, you know, all of my ads had the same thing, like I want to find people who are serious about music, who want to do it professionally, you know, and all this Captain America stuff. That's what Stevie Hart always calls me, like all my Captain America stuff. And basically when I asked him like, okay, what do you think about my music? He was like, I haven't listened to your tracks. I was like, dude, that's the point. That's why I recorded those 4 songs, to showcase my music. But I guess he didn't care because he just liked the idea that there was someone who was willing to be serious about the music. So there were 2 of us. I was supposed to be the singer and the bass player. He was supposed to be the keyboard player. We never really got to play or rehearse. We just held a few auditions. We like auditioned, I think like 4, 5 drummers. And essentially the drummer from Slip of the Lip ended up being the drummer in our fictional band at that point. And it was because he saw me how I played bass when we were recording the For the First Time EP with Slip of the Lip. He was like, don't you want to be the bass player? Because the bass player we had at the time, he was like, he couldn't play at all. And he was like, you know, you could take his place and you can be the bass player because you're so much better. So that's where he saw me play. So then we had a drummer, and we ended up in this interesting situation where we didn't have a guitar player. So we held a few auditions for guitar players. And I remember like, there was this one jerk. I mean, that's such an asshole. Like, I put up an ad on one of the Facebook groups, that was about the musicians from that region. And he basically replied that I have the skills, I have the potential to be the guitar player. So I was like, okay, so here are the 3 songs, learn them. I think he had like a week. And then we had a rehearsal. All of this was happening in Košice. Košice is the 2nd biggest town in Slovakia. It's about 70 kilometers away from my hometown, and basically since like 2011 I was always going to Košice to rehearse with the bands, to play the gigs. So I was traveling almost like weekly by bus, which is like an hour by bus. I still remember the 3 songs we gave him, which were like all of the guitar players had to learn those three songs. Those were Child's Anthem from Toto, Black Chandelier from Biffy Clyro, and Saviors Never Cry from Harem Scarum. All 3 very different tracks. And then when we had a rehearsal with him, he was like, you know, okay, let's do the first track. I don't know it. Okay, let's do the second one. Oh, I just heard it. I don't really know how to play that. Okay, let's go through the third track. Oh, I know it only like halfway through. I don't really know how to play that. So I was like, what the hell do you want to do here? So we sort of jammed, but it was really horrible. And then I remember that the next day I posted again the ad in the same group. I was like, I'm looking for a guitar player, and this admin of the group, he was like, what? He labeled the guy. He was like, he wasn't good enough? I'm like, yeah, he was good enough. That's why I'm still looking for a guitar player, asshole. And then he went on, that guitar player, he went on how arrogant I was and that I'm a jerk. And I was like, dude, I traveled 1 hour to Košice. I wasted my time, my money for the fuel. And you didn't even learn the song. So what the hell are you talking about? This would be actually a good climax of the story. And that's when I decided I've had it with the guitar players and decided to form a band without one. And even though I did have it with guitar players a little later on, and there is this like a common flaw that many of the really great guitar players share, that wasn't really fueling the whole no guitars decision. This is why I'm telling you, like, don't look for people through ads or anything, because it's just the worst. Right now, for example, I know a lot of musicians, so basically the way I do it now is that I simply just, call, get some references, and I actually try to get the people who are actually good. And I think that's much better. We are like 2013, 2014, we still didn't have a guitar player, but at that point I was thinking like, drums, bass and keyboards, wouldn't that be a cool rock band? Like if we try to play some maybe electronic rock music. At that point I was getting into more experimental side of rock music, so I was like, that would be an interesting project to play in this sort of like 3-piece. And a year later in 2014, basically Royal Blood rose to fame, and they were very famous for being a rock duo. There was a drummer and there was a singer and a bass player in one person, and if you didn't see them, you would believe definitely that there are 2 additional guitar players in the band. So I was like, you can rock hard without a guitar player. Of course, Royal Blood is a bit of a specific case because he runs his bass guitar through guitar and bass amp, so that's a bit of a different thing, but they didn't have guitars, that's the point. And when it comes to the saxophone player, this will be kind of interesting, but every time I heard a band or an artist I really loved and they had a saxophone on any of their albums, it always felt like a sign of maturity. Like for example, Journey on their Raised on the Radio, they have a saxophone solo on the track Positive Touch. Pink Floyd started using saxophone since The Dark Side of the Moon, and they had it on the tracks like Money or Us and Them. Then also Lady Gaga on Edge of Glory. So basically, anytime I heard that an artist had a saxophone on their album, I felt like, wow, at that point they were good, big, successful enough to have a saxophone player on the album. They are mature enough. So kind of a funny opinion, but that's when I started thinking like, isn't it a bit of a shame though that the saxophone always just comes in the middle of a song for a solo and basically that's it. It's like some cherry on top, but never really a permanent instrument. So that's when I started sort of thinking about including saxophone player as well. It's just water. So that's when I started thinking about including the saxophone player into this lineup, but quite honestly, this was more like a one-time idea for me. Like, this was my dream project. I thought to myself that once I'm famous enough, once I do music for a living, I want to do this project, like one album project, where I would find a keyboard player, a drummer, a saxophone player, and we would write music together, whatever it would be. And I wasn't really thinking about using my songs in this lineup, and many of the songs from Pursuits in Life 1, and even many of the songs that will end up on the second and on the third album were already written at that point, but I would never really think about using them with this instrumentation. So let's fast forward to 2017 in like, I think February or early March, I don't remember exactly. We had our last gig with Slip of the Lip. And if you have heard our EP at that point, and if you saw us live, we were a completely different band. We basically played only 2 songs from the EP, and all the new material that I have written was basically more like alternative metal, alternative rock. So the tracks like Way to Oppose, Pilgrim in Doubt, and so on, but with the guitars. And for a very long time, I've been wanting for us to go into the studio and record at least one new song to show our new musical direction. But the other band members were kind of reluctant to do that. And basically the reason why I left the group was that I was doing all the stuff, I was writing all the music, all the lyrics, I was basically doing everything, and I was being the bad guy for it. Of course, I'm pretty sure that if you ask them, they would have a different version. They would be like, music is supposed to be fun, and I was pushing them too hard. It's kind of a shame though, because both of the guitar players, they were actually great players. They were great guitar players, fantastic singers, both of them actually. And I think there was a lot of potential. So we've been very good friends. And at that point when I left the group, when I said like, I've had it with you, I'm taking my songs, I'm going away. And there was a lot of harsh things that we exchanged. Looking back now, I would probably do it in a little less aggressive way. But still, you know, the emotions were just boiling in me for a long time. So I decided to leave the group, and I left the group on a very, very bad terms. And even my wife told me she had known me at that point for like a year and a half. We've been together for, I don't know, for almost a year. And basically she told me that since I left the group, that was the first time I was like relaxed, like this heavy burden has fallen off of me. And that I was finally like being happy. She told me like, you are suddenly a different person. You know, it like gave me wings. I left this cage. So it was really beautiful. And what was really fueling me leaving that band was that I wanted to record my album. And I still remember how, I think at that time, we were on a train with Julie, with my wife, and she was a girlfriend at that point. And we were going to Prague, which is like an 11-hour trip. And we were about to see HOWS live. And as I was sitting on a train, I was thinking about potential lineups for my debut album, and the first option was that of Slip of the Lip, so 2 guitars, drums, bass. The second lineup was my favorite lineup in rock music, so drums, bass, keyboards, guitars. The third lineup was that of the album, so drums, bass, saxophone, keyboards. And the fourth lineup was the drums, bass, saxophone, keyboards, guitars. And there are 2 things that sort of influenced how I decided in the end. One of these things was that I was talking with Stevie Hart before we put the whole thing together. And this was the conversation that influenced certain subject matters in the track Cortex Labyrinthus, the final 15 minutes long magnum opus of the album. And you can find a video called Cortex Labyrinthus Essay. So what is happiness? Basically, that's how the video is called, where I analyzed the lyrics. So I mentioned this conversation there. And I asked him about these lineups, and he was like, I think you should go with drums, bass, saxophone, and keyboards, because that's really unique. I don't know anybody like that, and I think that's the most unique thing you can do. And also, there was this really beautiful moment when I left Slip of the Lip. I immediately became part of the Pink Floyd show, and I'm gonna get back to this moment in the next question. When I was a part of the Pink Floyd show since April until June 2017, and on June the 30th we played a gig in a city hall in front of like 260 people, and basically the whole 3 months they were just the highlight of my life. I loved it. It was such a beautiful period, and I was already a huge fan of Pink Floyd, but when I was part of that project, I just realized that, you know, there were so many great bands in the 70s, and what really made Pink Floyd stand apart was the sound. It's the sound that separates us musicians from each other. But I feel like all of the guitar-driven rock and metal bands sound the same. In my opinion, there's no guitar sounds we haven't heard so far that you can come up with. And now I'm not talking about the biggest bands like Guns N' Roses or AC/DC or Metallica, whatever. I'm talking about literally all the other bands that are guitar-driven bands. They all sound like someone out there. And I think that the songs from Pursuits in Life 1 would be great enough, even with the guitars. I just don't think they would really stand apart. We would sound just like everybody else. And you know, imagine that you got 100 records, and my album would be better than all the remaining 99 records. What reason would there be for you to pick it up if it sounded just like everybody else? And I really wanted to have a different and distinctive sound. And even with Stevie's encouragement, I was like, drums, bass, saxophone, keyboards, that's very unique. So I did some research. I was trying to find if there are any bands like that, because I was like, that's such a brilliant idea. There must be bands like that. And there have been a few. I'm not saying I'm the first one. For example, King Crimson had saxophone as one of the leading instruments on, I think, their first 3 albums on certain tracks. Van der Graaf Generator had a permanent saxophone player. Then the band most people brought up, and the band I found out in my research, was Morphine. That was a trio where you had a drummer, you had a singing bass player who had a 2-string bass and he was playing with the slide, and there was a saxophone player who had I think a baritone saxophone. But Morphine to me sound more like a minimalistic jazz trio playing alternative blues rock. You know, comparing them to my music, that's kind of like comparing Mastodon and the Beatles. You know, while Mastodon and the Beatles actually have the same instrumentation, and they both have at least 3 singing members, their music couldn't be further apart, and I think that's the same for Morphine and my music. And I haven't really found any band that sounded like this, you know, the saxophone player with pedal effects, bass with so many pedal effects. And I have a lot of friends who, similarly to me, listen to a lot of music, so I'm talking about a couple hundred records per year, and they also told me that they have never heard anything quite like Pursuits in Life. So I think that I really achieved being probably as original as you can be within like melodic music. Because, you know, if you come to a gig and you don't know about this band and you see drums, saxophone, bass and keyboards on the stage, you would either expect a pop band, a jazz band, maybe some experimental band, maybe some fusion, but definitely not rock or metal. This is what was fueling the whole no guitar thing, and it was actually very hard at first. You know, when I wrote down the set list for the album, I was like, I'm not sure if I can imagine these songs without guitars, you know. And actually, I'll tell you a little secret. I held a listening party in like mid-December 2017. That was when the album was basically finished, and I called a few of my friends, music enthusiasts, some fellow musicians, even some people who were not musicians at all. And we listened to the whole album, and I was pretty much prepared that if all of them told me that, look, Roman, it just doesn't work without guitars, I would call somebody to record additional guitars in the studio. And there were a few people who told me like, I missed the guitar on the album, or the album needs the guitar. I think majority of the people found it more interesting the way it is. I think that's the price for being extremely original and unique, that there are simply many traditionalists, many people who are used to things being a certain way, that they will not just suddenly start liking something being completely different. And it was the price I was willing to pay, so I was like extremely happy with the result. I do have to add though that if you searched for rock music without guitars but with saxophone, which is something I don't think anybody would actually be looking for, but if you did that, I'm not sure if you would find Yakobe that easily. I mean, I posted it on certain forums, so maybe after a little bit of searching you would actually stumble upon my band. But it just makes me think that there might be more bands like this. They are just hard to find. The second question, how did I get such a big and famous lineup on my first album? So there are basically 2 people who are like really famous, and that's the backing vocals were sang by Carmen Pál-baláž. She's basically the biggest pop star in Slovakia right now, and she's been like that for the past 2 years approximately. She was 3rd in Czechoslovakian Idol in 2018, but she basically ended up the best from Slovak contestants, and her biggest song has like 4 million views on YouTube, and her songs are just very, very frequently played on Slovak radios. And saxophone was recorded by Nikola Banko, who won the award New Faces of Slovak Jazz in 2015. He is currently studying at the Royal Academy in Denmark, and his debut album from last year, Bright Future, got a lot of positive reviews all over the world, and he's basically a rising star. You know, on his debut album he played with one of the biggest saxophone stars, Seamus Blake, so his career has, as his debut album is called Bright Future. So how did I get these people? A very simple answer would be I got them before they were famous. But there's a little more to that, and I'm gonna go into quite a lot of detail. So let's start. Basically, the very first person I approached was Stevie Hart. And there's this moment when I left Sleep of the Lip that I want to get back to. First of all, Stevie Hart, we've been schoolmates at the high school for 8 years. We had an sort of an acoustic duo in 2011, so there's quite a long history. You know, basically, I started being interested in music because of him. It was like in 2004 or 5, we've been like 14 years old, and at the end of a school year, usually we had to leave the school and we went with teachers into the nature, and he brought a guitar and he was singing, and all the girls were around him, and I was like, maybe that's a good way how to get chicks. So basically that's how I started being interested into being a musician. There's even one funny story, like in 2006 there was this one band that held audition for a singer, and both of us went there, and I actually ended up second. He won the audition. It's kind of a funny story. After the whole audition was over, the band members called both Stevie and me, and they asked us, "So Roman, who do you think was better, you or Stevie?" And I was like, "I think Stevie was better." "Stevie, who do you think was better, Roman or you?" "I think I was better." He really was. At that audition, he was better. Then he stopped being interested in music, and it was on one of my gigs, I think in 2011, when I played. And I played their acoustic set, but I also played with one band, and I sort of let him perform one song, and that sort of kick-started him into going back into music, and then he wrote one of his songs from the debut album. He released his debut album in 2015, so in case you haven't heard it, just check it out. It's a beautiful jazz, pop, blues kind of record. It's a really fantastic album. It's on Spotify, it's everywhere. So he released it in 2015, basically at the same year when I released an EP with Slip of the Lip. You should also check out Headlines, which is the first official music video of Stevie Hart, and it's from his upcoming second solo album, and quite honestly, that's the best music video I've ever seen. And I also have a little cameo there, so maybe that's why it's the best. Let's get back to that moment when I left Slip of the Lip. So that was, I think, like end of March. We exchanged these harsh messages on Messenger, and I think it was like Friday, Saturday, and on Monday I went to Košice, to that city, to actually see a doctor, to have my vocal cords checked. And when I was finished, the hospital was like 40 or 50 minutes away from the bus station by walking. And I love walking and listening to music while doing that, so I decided to take that walk. And as I was like 10 or 15 minutes away from the bus station, I called Stevie, and he was kind of familiar with the whole Slip of the Lip thing. He knew all the struggles, I wanted his advice, as one of my best friends. So, he's been aware of all the stuff. So I called him and I said that, "Look, Stevie, because I knew that he had some problems also in his band with the musicians. So I was like, look, you will always need a bass player in your group. I have a bass, I have a great sound, I can sing you backing vocals, I can help you out. I will do whatever you want within the band, you will be the boss of Stevie Hart. And I need a keyboard player in my own group, or I will need, hopefully. And you could play keyboards for me, you could sing backing vocals, and we could create this sort of a symbiosis where we would kind of help each other out." And he immediately surprised me by saying that, "Yeah, I was actually thinking about the same thing." I was like, "That's great." And then when the conversation ended, he called me a few minutes later and he was like, "I'm on my way to Košice, and could you borrow me some money?" Now, I know that this may sound like, what? But it was because he was in a hurry, so he wanted me to sort of borrow him some money, and he returned them to me at the end of the day. But anyway, he came to Košice, he had some sort of a medical treatment or whatever, I don't remember. And after he was finished, he was like, do you want to get your stuff from the Slip of the Lip rehearsal room? I was like, wow, you would do that for me? It wouldn't be a problem for you? He was like, look, I have a big car, it's empty, we can get your stuff. So that was so great that like 2 or 3 days after I left the group, I could go to the rehearsal room. So we went there, and I had quite a lot of equipment there. I had the PA system there, I had the mix, I had my bass amp, so we took all that stuff in, and that was the rehearsal room where we've been for like 2 months, and it was a pretty shitty building. And when we came there, actually there was some kind of a problem with the roof, and the water was dropping, and we had all these carpets on the floor, and they were soaking wet. It was like there was almost water everywhere. It was literally a couple hours away from damaging all of our equipment, so I took it all. And even though I was very angry at Slip of the Lip, I wrote to the guys that, look guys, get to the rehearsal, get here ASAP, get your equipment because it's gonna be damaged. I was pretty sure that if I didn't write them, they would maybe go to the rehearsal room like through the weekend and their equipment would be already gone. So of course that's a normal thing to do. So we took that, and it was just such a beautiful moment because right when Slip of the Lip ended, Pink Floyd show started. And basically I approached many people who were in the Pink Floyd show. So Stevie was the first choice, so he agreed to help me out with the record as a keyboard player. Then Nicola Banco, the saxophone player, he was actually the second saxophone player I approached. The very first one was Miloš Kostar, the saxophone player from, surprisingly, the Pink Floyd show. And he was a really great player, and I sort of a talk with him. I was like, you know, I want to do this band. You're gonna have to use a lot of pedal effects. It's gonna be very experimental. You're gonna be not there just for solos, but you have to like play riffs, themes, you know. And he was interested. And I remember that we had the very first rehearsal with him. So the very first Yakobe rehearsal was with different saxophone player. I think that was like mid to late July 2017. And funnily though, at that time I had already booked the studio for the end of October. And I remember that the first two tracks we did were from the first album, well, obviously from our first album. We're Building Our Own Monument and Living in Fear. And when we start, you know, he's a great player. He's a fantastic saxophone player, but he's a very traditional player. And when he started playing into those songs, I was like, what a stupid idea, Roman. It's not gonna work. You know, it sounded like rock songs trying to go jazz, or jazz songs trying to rock it up. I don't know, it just didn't sound good. But I always say that life will provide you with everything you need, and everything happens in a way it's supposed to. And like a week after that, or 2 weeks after that, we had a gig. I had a solo gig with a bass guitar and a looper, and Stevie played with Miloš. And basically, he couldn't be a part of the band anymore because he found some job where he had to drive people to the airport. So he basically told me, I can't be a part of the band anymore. I can't do that with you. So I asked him, can you give me some tips for saxophone players? And he gave me a few. And basically, I decided to call Nicola as the first choice, because when I went through his Instagram, he had pedal effects. I was like, that's what I need. I need a saxophone player with pedal effects. So I called Nicola. I explained the whole sort of idea of the band to him, and he was very, very interested, because I think that this would be the biggest test for his creativity at that point. And he really wanted to be a part of that, but he told me, I want to join you. I want to be a part of this group, but I can join you only in September because I'm very busy throughout the summer gigging. So I was like, no problem. So basically until the end of August, we rehearsed all of the tracks as a trio. So just Stevie, the drummer, and me. And then he joined us. And when it comes to Tibor Rusnak, the drummer on the album, well, he was actually the third drummer I approached. So can you see the pattern? The first keyboard player I approached ended up on the album. The second saxophone player I approached ended up on the album. And the third drummer I approached ended up on the record. So again, the first drummer I wanted on the album was the one from the Pink Floyd show, Jakub Vondra. He's a fantastic drummer, a great groove maker. I already played with him in Graceful, whom with I recorded my first album in 2011, but he was there just for the live playing, so I already knew him. He played on Stevie's first album. He was a great drummer. But kind of same thing happened as with the first saxophone player, that he got a job in Czech Republic. So he had to leave, and basically he couldn't be a part of the band anymore. The second drummer I contacted was our last drummer from Slip of the Lip, Laci Žiga. He was in Slip of the Lip for maybe half a year at that point when I left the group. So when I left Slip of the Lip, once again, we ended up on a very bad terms with both guitar players. But with him, even though we exchanged some harsh words, with him it was a bit better. Like, I mean, we still sort of maintain some sort of a friendship to this day. So I called him, I said, look, you know me, I want to make this record. And I remember how he told me, I know I'm going to regret this, but it's just too far away for me to travel 70 kilometers for every rehearsal. And even though I did that for like 3 or 4 years, I understood the situation he was in at that point. So I was like, okay, I understand that. So then I approached Tibor Rusnak, who's the drummer on the album and who's, in my opinion, one of the best drummers in our country and the best drummer I've ever played with. He's absolutely fantastic. I already approached him like 2 years before that, when he was like 16. And I don't remember now if it was supposed to be for Slip of the Lip or for my own group, for my own music. And it was going pretty well, but somehow it never really happened. So now when I called him, I think the reason why he said yes was that I told him that Miloš Kostar, that first saxophone player, is going to be there at the rehearsal. And he was like, Miloš is going to be there? Okay, I'm in. So, yeah, so that's how I got these people. When it comes to Carmen, pál-baláž, who did the backing vocals, the big pop star, so she was also part of the Pink Floyd show. She was playing keyboards and singing in the band. And basically I approached her and Marko Hunja. Marko Hunja was another singer and a guitar player from the Pink Floyd show. I approached them both that because we've been doing a lot of we've been working separately on all the backing vocals. Stevie, me, Carmen, and Marko. We've been working on all the Pink Floyd show vocals separately from the rest of the band. And I told them that, look, I would want you to be my 2 backing vocalists on the album. And I sent them all of the tracks. I just recorded them on phone with the guitar. I sent them all of the lyrics, and they actually pissed me off quite a lot because I don't remember exactly, but I think it was like a week before the studio. They still didn't have any vocals. They were like, we don't know what vocals to come up with. And I was like, Jesus. So basically I came up with all the backing vocals. I sent them to Carmen. She came to my apartment with all of the lyrics printed, all of her parts highlighted. So we went through all of the vocals, and then she delivered them pretty quickly in the studio. So that's how I got the pretty big lineup on this album. The next question, what does Yakobe stand for? Okay, first of all, there were a few people who asked me like, why is the band called Yakobe? I'm like, Yakobe? Are you stupid? Why would the first letter be a small letter and the remaining letters would be capital letters? Like, that doesn't make sense. So my surname is Yakobe with J at the end and J at the beginning, and the band name is basically an alternative version of that. I decided to use Y instead of J so that it would be easier for English-born speakers to pronounce this name in a way it's supposed to.
IAKO BEI? I think that's how you pronounce it. IAKO BEI.
Well, I guess that didn't work out as I wanted to, but Notes Reviews, he's one of the biggest prog music reviewers on YouTube. He's kind of known for butchering most of the band names, but yeah, it's supposed to be pronounced Yakobe, and I would kind of compare it to Bon Jovi. I mean, John Bon Jovi, his original name was like Bon Jovi or something like that. It's Italian name and he made it American. Basically, when you say Bon Jovi, you imagine John Bon Jovi, but it's a band. He's the frontman, so I guess he could never be kicked out of his band. But I think I wanted Yakobe as a name for 2 reasons. First of all, there are so many bands that have a very generic name. If you type their name into Google, you can find hundreds of other things until you actually stumble upon the band you're looking for. And I wanted people to find only my band when they search Yakobe. And I think that that's really great to have an original name. And what's more original than your surname? And the second reason is that when I approached Stevie, he told me that, look, I will help you out with the album. I will rehearse the tracks with you. I will record it, but don't count me in as a permanent member. He had his first solo album out. He was working on his second solo album. So obviously that was his priority. So he told me that that's my focus. And I'm going to help you out as much as I can. But I was planning on having a tour after the album comes out. I still didn't know how difficult that is to pull off. And he was like, don't count me in. Don't count me for gigs. I'm there only to help you out with the record. In the end, he helped me a lot more because he's been on all of the gigs I've had so far. And we're going to have finally a gig in 2 weeks. And that's going to be the first gig without him. But he helped me a lot more than he initially promised. And even though he left the group like a half a year ago because he sort of lost interest in music and he wants to take a break from music, I still love him. He's not in a band because we had an argument or anything. He just simply wants to take a break from music, and I genuinely love him. He's one of the best human beings I know. He's a wonderful person. He was my best man on my wedding. So, you know, he's one of my best friends, so we still keep in touch, and I really hope he will get back to music because he's a phenomenal writer, he's a phenomenal musician, and he's really missed in the group. When it comes to the saxophone player and the drummer, so Nico and Tibor, they were both actually schoolmates at the high school at that time. So that was their last year at high school, 2017-2018. I knew that they were both planning on going abroad to study music further. So Nico, he went to Denmark. So that basically meant that there was no way he could be a part of the group anymore. And Tibor, he went to Czech Republic. So I think that the reason why I decided to name the band Yakobe to sort of reflect my surname and to reflect me was that at that point I was kind of aware of the fact that a year from that point I might have 3 different musicians around me. And if we had like a regular band name, I think that that would be very confusing for most people, and it might even look bad on my part, like, wow, he's the only one remaining in the group. I guess he's an asshole. I was aware of the fact that the musicians around me might change, so I wanted to sort of emphasize that yes, Yakobe is a group, because I was always more... I always wanted to be in a group rather than being a solo act. So it is a band, but also it reflects my name. Funnily though, I didn't have this name for a very long time. Even when we finished the album, I still didn't have a name for this group. And I remember that originally I wanted to call it Roman, because my YouTube channel at that point was called Roman, and it was supposed to be like the rise of modern artistic nihilism. Jesus, that's horrible. Then I was thinking about like Roman Yakobe Band or Roman's Unconventional Ensemble and all these stupid names. So essentially Yakobe is a really great name, even though it has some sort of a Japanese sounding to it. But I think that in the end it's great. So basically that's the reason I knew that the lineup wouldn't prevail. I'm very happy to say that Tibor, the drummer, is still part of the group and he wants to continue. And the other band members will see. Because for example, the last 3 gigs, we had a different saxophone player on every one of those gigs. We're gonna have the 4th saxophone player on the next gig. So I personally hope that the lineup will stabilize. Again, the last question, which is kind of a bonus question, and actually nobody really asked me this question, but it's something I would be interested in. Why am I making all of these videos like Hows and Whys of Yakobe, track by track, studio documentary, sounds behind the record, the making of music videos, when these kind of videos are really made by bands that have a big fan base and which basically have a lot of people who would be interested in that? So the answer to this is relatively simple. Some of my all-time favorite records are actually records that are not very famous, and basically there's very little information about them. So, you know, whatever information I stumble upon, I'm like, wow, that's something new. But usually it's very hard to really learn anything new. And I decided that I don't need a big audience to sort of put that information out there. I simply did it. Whoever is interested in this album, he can learn a lot of stuff about it. I think there's so much passion behind those videos. And I'm still planning on doing a few about the album, but basically that's the reason. You know, the album is not very successful at this point, but there might be people who will be like, wow, I really like it, I want to know more about it. So the information is out there, and it's the same type of information I would like to have with certain of my favorite records. So basically that's the whole reasoning behind it. Whew, that was a lot of talking, but I hope you enjoyed it. So if you did enjoy my stories, my numerous detours down the memory lane, and if I answered the questions properly, let me know in the comment section below, or give a like or whatever. And also, if you like this album, be sure to check all of the other videos, but also be sure to check Nicola Banco, Stevie Hart, Carmen pal-balaz. They're all great, they do great music, so be sure to check them out as well. And I think that's it. I'm gonna take a very long... well, not long, I'm gonna take a lot of sips of water, or maybe a long sip of water. Thanks for watching.